The hallways of the Galactic Unity Academy buzzed with the usual noise of chatter and metallic footsteps, but when Lyra walked through the front entrance, everything seemed to slow, as if the air itself hesitated to welcome her. She was tall, with translucent violet skin and glowing rings under her eyes that pulsed softly like a silent scream. Her race was unknown to most of the students, and that alone was enough to brand her as different. Her steps were quiet, but the laughter behind her was loud, cruel, and meant to pierce right through her spine. She kept walking, head down, arms folded, as if trying to hold herself together, pieces threatening to fall apart at any moment. In the cafeteria, no one made space for her. She sat alone near the waste unit where trays of food were dumped. She did not eat, just stared at her hands, covered in faint lines that shimmered faintly every time someone insulted her names. Like glow freak, warm blood shimmer trash bounced off the metal walls but landed like stones in her chest. Across the room, a human boy named Ray watched. He had seen bullying before, but this was different. It was silent torture. It was the way everyone pretended not to see, how they all shared the same guilt by ignoring her presence. Ray never spoke to her, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how the girl looked. Like she had built a wall so high no one dared to knock. Classes were no better. Teachers never called on her even when her hand was raised, and when one of the dominant alien races spilled a liquid on her datapad, they were rewarded with laughter, not punishment. During combat simulations, Lyra was always paired with the strongest student, a reptilian brute named Kale, who took pleasure in slamming her into the mat every single round. No one called foul, no one said stop, no one even looked disturbed, and after every session, she limped out without complaint, her eyes empty, her mouth shut, her arms wrapped around her ribs. Ray had been raised on Earth before his family moved to the outer colonies, and he remembered how his mother once told him that silence was worse than hatred, because it let evil grow without challenge. And he felt that silence inside him, now a buzzing shame growing louder with every passing day. He knew something had to change, or else he would become just like the rest, part of the machine that ground down anyone who didn't fit in. Day, as he walked down corridor C4, he heard a crash followed by a sharp cry. The sound echoed, and it made his heart stop. He rushed ahead and saw Lyra on the floor, her books scattered, her cheek bleeding. A group of students surrounded her, laughing. One of them, a tall, sleek-skinned alien with golden armor, stood with a boot on her bag, sneering down at her. "You don't belong here, shimmer trash," he said in a voice smooth as oil. The others nodded, amused. Ray didn't think. He just moved. His body acted before his brain could list the reasons not to. He pushed through the circle and stood in front of Lyra, his voice steady but low enough to shake with fury. "Get away from her," he said. The laughter stopped instantly. The golden alien looked surprised, then confused, then amused again. "Oh look, the human wants to play hero," he said with a smirk. "Do you even know what she is? Do you know what you're protecting?" Gray didn't answer. He knelt down and picked up Lyra's bag, then offered his hand to her. Her fingers hesitated, then slowly curled around his. She stood up, not meeting his eyes but not pulling away either. And that silence that followed was different, not empty, but full of questions. Whispers began to float down the hall. Who is he? Why did he do that? What does he think he's doing? As Ray walked away with Lyra at his side, those whispers followed them like shadows. They didn't speak much. As they walked, she didn't thank him, and he didn't ask her to. But when they reached the bench outside the hydroponics dome, she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet and fragile like glass. "I didn't need your help," she said. He nodded. "Maybe, but you got it anyway." She didn't reply, but she sat next to him, and they watched the glowing plants sway under artificial wind. She didn't smile, but she wasn't frowning anymore either. As the lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Ray noticed something on her arm. A strip of cloth had slipped, and underneath it a series of glowing patterns stretched along her skin. They shimmered not like wounds, but like circuits, pulsing with energy, living symbols moving beneath the surface. He didn't ask what they were, not yet, but something told him those marks meant more than she was ready to say, and that she had hidden them for a reason. And somewhere in the shadows, a camera blinked, recording everything, transmitting the footage to someone who watched with cold eyes. And a deeper plan, something had begun, and there was no turning back now. Ray did not sleep much that night. His mind was filled with flashes of the moment Lyra took his hand, the cold way the golden alien looked at him, the strange glow beneath her skin, and the silence that followed him back to his dorm like a ghost. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the words his father once said to him. Real strength means stepping forward when nobody else will. And Ray knew he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The next morning, the air in the academy hallways felt thicker. Students paused when they saw him. Some stared openly, some whispered behind half-raised screens. A few laughed, but most just looked confused. A human standing up to one of the noble races for a shimmer girl, that was not something anyone had seen before, and they were trying to figure out if Ray was stupid brave or just suicidal. Found Lyra sitting in the corner of the library, her eyes focused on a screen filled with equations far more advanced than what their class was studying. Her hands moved in strange fluid motions, adjusting the data with a precision that did not match someone who struggled in class. She noticed him, but said nothing. He sat down across from her without asking her permission, and after a long silence, he finally spoke. "You're way smarter than you let on," he said. She didn't reply, just blinked slowly and kept working, but her lips twitched for the briefest second like a smile trying to escape and getting caught halfway. Ray leaned forward. "I saw the marks last night," he said quietly. "What are they?" He expected her to shut down, to run away, to get angry. Instead, she sighed and minimized the screen. Her fingers tapped a pattern into the table's surface, and a thin blue shield activated around their booth, cutting off sound and vision from anyone outside. "You should not have helped me," she said, "not because I didn't want help, but because they will come for you now. They always do for anyone who gets close." Ray didn't back down. "Who are they?" he asked. "The nobles, the teachers, the watchers." She looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly, and said, "All of them. My race was once known as the Veilborn. We had a gift. We could see through energy, not just read it, but feel it shape it, bend it with thought and instinct. But when the old empires discovered this, they feared us, so they enslaved us, made us weapons. Then when we became too dangerous, they tried to erase us." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing more of the glowing patterns, each line pulsing with a soft internal rhythm, like it was alive, like it was breathing. "This is my curse and my power," she said. "If I use it, they will brand me a threat. If I hide it, they think I am weak. Either way, they hate me." Ray felt his stomach twist. Everything about her, every scar, every silence suddenly made sense, and all of it made him furious. "They can't erase people just because they're afraid of them." He said. "They can, and they did," she replied. "Only a few of us survived, hidden, scattered, and broken. My parents died running from bounty hunters. I was smuggled to this school under a false name, hoping no one would notice, hoping I could learn in peace. But peace is not something the galaxy offers." Izalithy sat in silence for a while, the shield humming softly around them. Then Ray asked, "What happens now?" "Now you walk away," she said, looking at him directly. "Now you pretend none of this happened. Go back to your friends, go back to safety. Let me fade like I always do." He shook his head. "Not a chance. I'm already in this. You don't get to push me out, and if they come for me, then I'll deal with it with you or alone. Either way, I'm not leaving you alone." And Fisher eyes widened just a little, not from fear, but from something deeper, something like hope, something like disbelief. "No one has ever said that to me before," she whispered. "Not ever." And this time, when her lips twitched, it wasn't just a smile. It was the beginning of something powerful, something that could not be erased. Later that day, as they walked to their next class, a group of students blocked the hallway. Kale stood in front, his arms folded, his eyes narrow and full of challenge. The golden alien stood beside him, smirking. "Still think you're a hero, human?" Kale growled. Ray stepped forward calmly. "Not a hero, just someone who's not afraid to punch a bully in the mouth." The crowd gasped, but no one laughed this time. Something had changed, something was breaking, and they all felt it. Kale took a step forward, but before he could move, Lyra raised her hand, not to attack, but to speak, her voice clear and louder than ever before. "You think I am nothing, but I am Veilborn, and I am done hiding." And for the first time, the glow in her arms began to rise, not in fear, but in control, pulsing with strength, like the heartbeat of a storm waiting to be unleashed. The hallway went silent again, but this silence was not fear. It was attention. It was the moment before thunder, and in the eyes of the students, there was no more laughter, only curiosity and a growing respect that no one could have predicted. Sky above the academy shimmered with artificial stars and rotating satellites that circled in perfect rhythm, while below, the tension in the school reached a boiling point. After the hallway confrontation, Ray and Lyra became the center of every whisper, every look, every half-finished sentence that died when they entered a room. Some feared them, some hated them, but more and more just watched with quiet curiosity, like they were waiting to see what would happen next. Ray noticed how other students gave him space in the mess hall, how even Kale didn't throw his usual threats anymore, and how Lyra began to walk with her head slightly higher, like something inside her had remembered how to breathe again. They found themselves on the edge of the old maintenance tunnels deep beneath the academy, where most students never ventured. It was Ray's idea. He wanted to find a place where no cameras, no teachers, no eyes could reach them. If she was going to explain what the markings truly meant, he needed to understand. In a space where she felt safe, the tunnels were damp and filled with humming energy lines, but they were empty and forgotten, and that made them perfect. Lyra stood in front of an old power relay, her hand hovering above it, the lights in her skin reacting to the currents in the walls, flickering in rhythm Like they were speaking to each other. My ancestors were not just energy benders, she said softly. We were architects of the invisible. We could feel the pulse of machines, the breath of power cores, even the whispers in neural networks. We didn't just use technology, we merged with it, and that terrified them. They called us witches, demons, parasites, anything to strip us of our identity and justify our destruction. Ray leaned against the wall, listening with his full attention. Not judging, not doubting, just absorbing every word. What happened to them? He asked. They were hunted across the stars, enslaved, used as batteries for living ships. Our minds were plugged into fleets, first to guide navigation through black holes, forced to destroy entire planets without consent. Then, when they no longer needed us, they purged us with viral codes that destroyed our thoughts, our memories, even our names. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes glowing like twin moons. I was born after the purge, hidden away by rebels who died before I turned 6. I have survived by pretending to be normal, by dimming the light in my veins, by forgetting who I am. But when you stepped in that day, you reminded me that silence is not survival, it is surrender. And I am tired of surrendering. Gray walked toward her, his voice low and steady. You don't have to pretend anymore, not around me. We'll figure this out together. And if they come, we stand together and fight together. Her eyes met his, and something changed in that moment, a spark not of romance, but of alliance forged in pain and defiance, stronger than any bond of blood or species. Raised her hand and touched the relay, and the entire tunnel glowed. Blue circuits and the walls came alive. The ground vibrated, as if welcoming her like a long-lost daughter. The air filled with static that tingled against Ray's skin, and for the first time he saw her fully, not as a quiet girl with haunted eyes, but as a living force of nature, connected to the heart of the galaxy itself. The power didn't explode, it flowed like a river through her fingertips, gentle but unstoppable. But then she pulled her hand back, and the light vanished, the silence returned, and her body trembled, not from weakness, but from restraint. It hurts to hold it back, she said. It's like suffocating every second. But if I release it completely, I don't know what will happen. I could destroy everything or nothing, or just myself. Ray nodded. Then we find a way to help you control it. You shouldn't have to break to feel free. They returned to the surface, and word of their alliance spread faster than fire in dry air. Some students approached Ray quietly, asking questions about the Shimmer Girl, about the truth, about the symbols. Some offered quiet support, others warned him to stop before it was too late. Even one teacher pulled him aside and whispered, you don't know what you're getting involved in, human. You should walk away before you're buried in something far older and darker than you realize. Ray ignored them all and focused on Lyra, helping her learn how to breathe through the storm inside her. He taught her old Earth combat techniques, how to move with her feet steady, how to breathe through panic, how to fight without fear. She in return showed him how energy danced when no one was watching, how even silence had music, how the smallest pulse could control the largest machine. But just as their connection deepened, a message appeared on Ray's private console. No signature, no sender, just a blinking line of text. You were warned, now you'll see the price. And before he could react, the screen exploded in sparks, and his room went dark, and across campus Lyra screamed in pain, as every hidden circuit in her body surged without warning, and the power within her tried to escape. Heath's scream tore through the night like lightning across glass, shattering the calm of the academy, and leaving only raw panic behind. Lyra had collapsed outside the main tower, her body convulsing with waves of blue light racing across her skin, her hands clenched into fists so tight they drew blood, and her eyes wide open, glowing like dying stars. Ray reached her first, sliding to his knees beside her, not caring who was watching or how dangerous this might be. Her name fell from his mouth again and again, but she could not hear him, trapped inside a storm of memories and energy that refused to be silenced. That security bots arrived in seconds, weapons raised, scanning for threats. The moment they registered abnormal energy levels, they stepped forward, preparing to contain the anomaly. But Ray stood up and blocked their path, his arms spread wide, his voice steady and loud. She's not the threat, you are. Stand down. They ignored him and raised their pulse cannons, preparing to fire. Then everything froze, the bots, the wind, the flickering lights, the very hum of the power grid. It all stopped, like time itself held its breath. And from behind the security line walked a woman draped in black armor lined with red circuits, her face hidden behind a mirrored mask, her voice calm and cold enough to freeze steel. Remove the human, she ordered. He has violated cross-species interference codes and will be detained for questioning. Her agents moved forward, but Ray did not budge, not until you explain who you are and what you did to her. She tilted her head slightly. I am Inquisitor Hallex of the Galactic Watchers. We have been observing Subject Lyra. Since she entered this academy, she was not meant to bond, she was meant to remain dormant. Once she activated, the suppression net failed and she became unstable. Your interference accelerated the process, and now she must be extracted and neutralized. Dre's fists clenched. So this was never about safety, it was about control. You were just waiting for a reason to erase her again, Hallex said. Nothing but her silence spoke louder than any denial. Two agents grabbed Ray by the arms and dragged him back. He struggled until he saw Lyra rise slowly, her body swaying. But her eyes locked onto Hallex with a fury that bent the very air around. "Hair, you call me unstable," she said, her voice echoing with power. "You made me this way. You hunted my people, buried our names, erased our history, and now you want to silence me again. I am done hiding, I am done obeying, I will not let you cage me again." Hallex raised her hand and a pulse cannon locked onto Lyra's chest. But before it fired, Lyra raised her arm and the air itself bent around her. The cannon exploded in the guard's hand and the agents fell back in shock. Lyra stepped forward, her body glowing brighter with each breath, and the ground beneath her cracked, as if rejecting the weight of the lies that had buried her. "I was born to see beyond the veil, and now I see you clearly. You are afraid not of me, but of what I represent. You cannot control what you do not understand, and you do not understand." Mireille broke free and stood beside her, his voice raw and loud. "Then let them try. We're not alone anymore. And that changes everything around them." Students began to gather. Not running, not hiding, but watching, standing, forming a silent wall of witnesses. Some held their breath, others whispered her name. And in that moment something ancient stirred, not in Lyra, but in the hearts of those who had once stayed silent and now saw something worth standing for. Hallex looked at the crowd, then at Lyra, then turned and signaled her agents fall back. "For now," she said coldly, "but know this, Shimmer Girl. You have declared war on the silence, and the silence always strikes back." She vanished into the shadows, leaving behind scorched earth and questions too large to ignore. Lyra collapsed again, this time not in pain, but in exhaustion. Ray caught her before she hit the ground and held her tightly, whispering words she could barely hear, but felt in her bones. "You're not alone, not now, not ever." The academy changed after that. No longer just a place of learning, but a ground where truth and power had collided. The administrators called meetings, the galactic networks demanded answers, but Lyra and Ray remained quiet, training hidden away in the tunnels, where old machines whispered forgotten names and power lines pulsed with new life. Lyra learned to shape her gift without pain, to bend energy with grace instead of fear, to turn her curse into a shield and her voice into a weapon. Ray taught her how to fight without losing herself, how to protect without becoming the thing she hated, and together they built something new, not just strength, but belief that even in a galaxy built on silence, one voice could still echo loud enough to shake it. But far above the academy, in a hidden station floating beyond the reach of Law Inquisitor, Hallex stood before a council of shadows, her voice flat. "The Shimmer Girl has awakened, and the human is the key. They do not understand what they have started, but the echo is already spreading thin." A voice from the Dark One that had not spoken in 100 years said, for words that changed the course of everything, "Prepare the protocol for extinction." The night before it began, Ray sat beside Lyra in the dim tunnels, where light hummed from ancient circuits and silence was softer than anywhere else. She was focused, her hands glowing with steady rhythm, her breath controlled, her eyes calm. For the first time in weeks she had found balance between fear and fire, between hiding and rising. Ray watched her quietly, not as a protector but as someone who had become something else, a witness to a spark that refused to die. Opened her eyes slowly and looked at him. "The council will not stop," she said. "This academy is only the beginning. I feel something bigger, something waiting beyond this place, something that has been waiting for someone like me to wake." Ray nodded. "Then let them come, because you're not going to face it alone, and I am not going to step back just because the galaxy is afraid of your light." Above them alarms blared, not the usual drills, but something sharper, louder. Real students poured into the halls. As announcements rang out, all personnel returned to quarters. "This is not a test." Repeat, "This is not a test." Ray grabbed Lyra's hand and they rushed upward, past old vents and rusted panels, reaching the upper floors, where windows trembled with the sound of ships descending, silver crafts marked with the symbol of the Watchers touched down, and out stepped squads in black armor, moving with the precision of those trained to kill first and ask questions. Latter students were herded into common halls, confused, frightened, some crying, some angry, but all watching when the masked figures passed, dragging faculty away without explanation. Ray and Lyra stood near the balcony watching it all unfold, and she whispered, "They are not here to talk. They are here to erase." The leader of the squad stepped into the center of the main hall, his voice amplified, cold and without emotion. "Under order of the Galactic Stability Protocol, this academy is now under direct control of the High Council. All Shimmer variants and their associates must surrender immediately or face termination." Lyra felt her heart race. Not with panic but fury. They were not even pretending anymore. No more lies, no more shadows, just open threat and violence. Ray stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. She's not a weapon, she's a student like the rest of us. You have no right. The officer raised his hand and Ray was thrown backward by a pulse wave, crashing into the wall hard enough to crack the paneling. Lyra screamed, and something inside her snappage moved faster than sight, her body a blur of light and heat. Her hands swept through the air and the armor on the guards shattered like glass. The ground cracked with every step. The energy lines in the walls surged toward her, welcoming her like an old friend, and the air itself bent to her will. She reached Ray in seconds, her hands on his chest, healing him with pulses of warmth that stitched what the impact had broken. The soldiers opened fire, but the bullets never reached her. Instead, they froze mid-air, caught in a field of twisting energy that hummed like a living symphony. Lyra turned, her eyes glowing brighter than any sun, and spoke not just to the attackers, but to everyone watching. I will not run, and I will not let you destroy what is finally beginning to heal. You taught me to fear, but now I remember who I am, and I will not forget again. Students began to rise, not with weapons, but with voices shouting her name, standing between her and the soldiers, raising their hands not in anger but in unity. And the soldiers hesitated, not because they were outnumbered, but because something greater had shifted. Control was cracking, and fear was no longer in. Ray stood beside her again, bruised but smiling, and he said, "You were never the threat, Lyra. They always were. And now everyone can see it." The soldiers retreated, for now ordered to regroup, as reports flooded the higher ranks that the Shimmer Girl had activated fully and gained the support of the next generation of leaders, scientists, warriors, and thinkers across dozens of species. Later that night, as quiet returned and the fires were put out, Lyra sat beside Ray under the cracked dome of the greenhouse, looking at the artificial stars above them. "I never wanted to be a symbol," she said softly. "I just wanted to exist." Ray nodded. "But symbols don't choose to be symbols. They rise when no one else will, and maybe that's what makes them real." Lyra looked at her hands, still glowing but steady now, and said, "If they come again, I won't run. But I also won't fight with hate. I will fight with truth, because power without compassion is just another kind of chain. And I will never wear chains again." For away in the hidden chamber of the Watchers, Inquisitor Hallex reviewed the footage, her expression unreadable. "The Shimmer Girl has awakened fully, and now she speaks like a leader," she said quietly. Then the voice from the shadows replied, "Then we end her before she becomes more than that." The next morning arrived, not with sunrise, but with silence, heavy and unnatural, as if the academy itself was holding its breath. Every corridor, every screen, every student waited for what would come next. The walls had seen rebellion, the air had tasted power, and nothing could return to the way it was. Not after what Lyra had done, not after what Ray had stood against. The students gathered in the central dome, where cracked glass led in the light of distant systems and the echoes of a future not yet written. Lyra stood in the center, her back straight, her skin still glowing faintly, not with rage, but with purpose. Ray stood beside her, his arm in a sling, but his eyes sharp, watching the faculty watch her, waiting to see if they would fight back or stand aside. "This is not a war," she said, her voice calm, steady, not loud, but carried by something deeper. "This is a beginning. For too long this place trained us to forget who we are, to obey without thought, to fear difference and punish truth. I was not the only one broken here, and I will not be the only one healed." No one interrupted, no one mocked her. The silence had changed from dismissal to respect, from curiosity to awe. She walked among the students, her hands brushing shoulders, her presence warm, her power no longer hidden. Some reached out to her, others stepped aside, but none turned away. Ray noticed the shift in posture, the way even Kale watched, with a mix of uncertainty and something like Gilthan. The sky split open above them as a ship unlike any they had seen before descended, its hull black as obsidian, its engines silent as it hovered over the academy. This was not a patrol craft, not a transport. This was a tribunal vessel, and its presence meant only one thing: judgment had come. The dome darkened as a projection flickered to life, revealing the face of an elder from the Galactic Council, ancient, lined, unmoving. "Glyra of the Veilborn, you are hereby summoned to stand trial for violation of suppression protocols, unauthorized activation of forbidden power, and incitement of interspecies unrest. Surrender immediately, or face planetary containment." Ray stepped forward. "This is a learning institution, not a battlefield. She has done nothing but survive while your systems failed her." The elder's voice did not change, but his words grew colder. "The Council does not negotiate with anomalies. The Shimmer bloodlines were erased for a reason, and their return threatens the balance. You have one hour to comply, or be destroyed with all those who harbor her." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Lyra remained still, her eyes closed, her body still. She opened them slowly, and looked at Ray. If I go, they will silence me forever. If I stay, they will try to erase everyone here. He looked at her not with fear, but pride. Then we give them no choice. We make them see that what they fear is not destruction, but change. They moved quickly, rallying the students, setting up shields over the dome, connecting to old systems hidden deep beneath the academy systems. Lyra could now read like a second language, her power flowing into circuits that had not been touched in centuries. Ray coordinated defense points, using human tactics forgotten by most galactic forces, built not for domination, but for resistance, for survivalis. The R faded, the ship above charged its core. The sky turned red as warnings screamed through the academy, and the students braced themselves for an end that felt too real, too close. Then Lyra stepped forward and raised both hands, and the sky responded. The clouds bent, the light shifted, and the energy weapon charging above froze in place, not destroyed, not shattered, but held in stillness by something stronger than Firth. Council elder stared in disbelief. Impossible, he said. One cannot hold a core cannon in stasis, not even with ancient tech. And Lyra spoke finally. I am not using tech, I am using truth. Your fear created this weapon, but my strength unbuilds it, not with hate, but with understanding. The council's time is ending. Your silence is ending. Your control is ending, because every one of us down here, every student, every species is waking up. The weapon cracked, then dimmed, then vanished, and the ship above began to pull back, as if the very presence of Lyra now repelled their authority. The elders' projection flickered once more. We will return, and when we do, you will not be alone. And Lyra replied, I was never alone, not even in silence. As the ship vanished into the stars, the dome filled with light. Cheers erupted, and students embraced each other. Teachers looked around, dazed and unsure what to do. Ray smiled through a bruise and walked to Lyra, who stood now not as a victim, but as a leader. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes still burning, but no longer from pain. You stopped a war without firing a shot, he said. She looked at him and smiled just a little. No, I just reminded them we were still alive and that we would no longer kneel. And in that moment the galaxy tilted, not through violence, but through voice, not through power, but through presence, and everything began to change. The academy stood quiet in the days that followed, not from fear, but from reflection. The halls, once filled with whispers of mockery, now echoed with footsteps of students who had seen what it meant to rise, who had felt what it meant to resist without destruction, who had watched a girl no one believed in stop a force that once ruled without question. Lyra walked those halls, not as a shadow, but as a light. Her steps no longer soft, her presence no longer hidden, and with each passing day more students came to her, not to worship, not to follow, but to learn, to listen, to understand what it meant to truly stand for something. Ray stood with her, always, not as a guardian or savior, but as a friend who had chosen to believe when belief felt foolish, who had chosen to fight when silence was easier. Together they began something that would spread far beyond the academy. They called it the Starborn Accord. Not a rebellion, not a faction, but a movement, built on the idea that truth was not weakness and compassion was not surrender. It was an invitation, a declaration that the galaxy would no longer be run by those who feared what they could not control. Lone morning, as the red moons of the nearby system aligned, Lyra received a message, a request, not from the council, not from the Watchers, but from the Galactic Archive, a beacon that had remained neutral for thousands of years, a place where knowledge was preserved beyond politics, beyond war. They asked her to speak not just to a room, not just to a planet, but to the entire network of connected systems. Her story had reached corners even she could not imagine. Whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into calls for change. The transmission was set. Ray helped her prepare. The room was small, but the signal would reach billions. The camera hummed softly, the air still thick with weight, but not fear. And when the light turned green, she began. I was born into silence, first to hide because of what I was told I should never be. I lived in a galaxy that taught me my voice was dangerous, that my truth was a weapon that must be buried, but I have learned something. They never wanted me to discover. She paused, not for drama, but for breath. For clarity. Your fear of me does not make me a threat. Your control over history does not make it truth. Your silence does not erase the sound of a rising voice. And I am not the only one speaking anymore. I am not asking for power, I am asking for presence, not asking for revenge, but remembrance, not asking for war, but for understanding. The Shimmer bloodlines were never broken, only scattered. And we are coming together again, not to destroy, but to help. Transmission reached planets where Shimmer children lived in hiding, moons where old survivors whispered their names in the dark. It reached humans who had always felt out of place, until they saw Ray stand beside someone different, and treat her not as fragile, but as whole. It reached soldiers who had questioned orders and teachers who had wondered what their silence had cost. It reached them a laughter. The speech messages poured in, some filled with hope, some with threats, some with questions. Lyra read each one carefully and answered as many as she could, not with long speeches, but with honesty. Sometimes just 2 words, "I understand." Sometimes just one, "You matter." Ray watched her and knew what they had started would not end with them, and that was the point. Not to be heroes, not to be remembered, but to begin something that would never again be silenced. The Academy changed officially to policies rewritten, new voices invited into the council, student elections now open to every species, no longer ranked by origin or wealth, but by ideas, by courage, by truth. Kale even approached Lyra one day, not with apology, but with a question: how do you control it? She did not mock him. She trained with him and others who once stood apart and now stood curious. The guards no longer patrolled with fear, they listened with care, and the teachers began to teach with eyes wide open. Months passed, the stars moved, and Lyra and Ray stood again under the cracked dome, now rebuilt with shimmer stone infused with energy from her own veins, a living roof that glowed with peace and memory. They looked up together, not in silence, but in thought, and Ray finally asked, "What do we do now?" And Lyra smiled softly, "We live, we lead. We lift others who are still buried, and when the next voice rises, we stand behind it, not in front." Nodded. "Then let's get to work, because I think the galaxy is finally ready to listen, and even if it isn't, we'll speak anyway, and they'll have no choice but to hear." In the heart of the rebuilt academy, where light flowed through walls like liquid memory, and every step echoed with new purpose, Lyra stood before a gathering of species. From every corner of the galaxy they had come, not because they were ordered, not because they were forced, but because they had heard something real, something they could not forget, and now they wanted to see the girl who changed everything, without violence, without lies, without fear. She wore no armor, no crown, only a simple robe marked with the ancient symbols of her people, symbols that once brought her pain, now worn with pride. Ray stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes calm, watching the room fill with old enemies, new friends, curious minds, and wounded hearts, all drawn together by a moment in time that refused to fade, a moment they all now shared, whether they understood it or not. She stepped forward and raised her voice, not to command, but to invite. We were taught that power must look a certain way, sharp, cold, loud. We were told that silence was safety and obedience was peace, but I learned that silence is a prison, and peace built on fear is just another name for control. I stand here not as a leader, not as a weapon, not as a symbol. I stand here as a reminder that the truth does not vanish when ignored. It waits, it grows, and when it rises, it does not ask for permission. She looked around the room, saw tears in eyes that once held suspicion, saw nods from those who had never agreed on anything until now, saw hope flickering in places once hollow. This is not the end of fear, not the end of conflict, not the end of struggle, but it is the end of hiding, the end of forgetting, the end of believing that we are too small to matter. Your story is yours to carry, your voice is yours to raise, and no council, no system, no shadow has the right to take it from you. Applause did not erupt. Instead, there was stillness, a silence so full it felt like thunder, and in that stillness something shifted. The past no longer a chain, the future no longer a void, just a path waiting to be walked together. Later, as stars blinked above, and the academy returned to its quiet hum, Lyra and Ray walked side by side through the courtyard, where young students practiced old skills with new purpose, where laughter and language blended into something beautiful. He looked at her and asked, "Do you think they'll keep listening?" And she answered, "Maybe, or maybe they'll forget. But we'll keep speaking, and that will be enough, because change does not come with noise, it comes with persistence." Sethi reached the end of the path, where the garden met the edge of the sky, and looked up together, not searching for signs, but simply breathing in the world they had helped shape, a world that had once tried to erase them and now stood rewritten. The end.